Let's continue by discussing proposed explanations for moral development and Schroeder's Code of Ethics that expand upon Kohlberg's model. So there are a couple explanations that have been discussed to explain the universality and cultural variability seen in Kohlberg's model. The first explanation is that the education system in the West allows for people to reach the third level, the final level of Kohlberg's model, although this explanation seems to be ethnocentric in that it presupposes that the third stage is the best. Now, that's how Kohlberg talks about it, that everybody reaches this and it is sequential, so it's seen as the best or the most advanced. The second interpretation, which is more relativistic, is that cultures are seen as encountering different challenges, and so the moral systems that they develop are in response to particular cultural environments. There may be moral values that Kohlberg's model does not include, and this is where Schroeder comes in. As a critique of Kohlberg's model, Schroeder argues that Kohlberg's model represents only one of three different ethics. Schroeder proposes three key moral ethics that are evident and universal. The ethic of autonomy comprises Kohlberg's model. It focuses on individual freedom and rights, especially choice and individual liberty. Then Schroeder adds the ethic of community, where it's about conforming to the roles and duties of community or social hierarchy, and the ethic of divinity. And this has to do with the sanctity of things, involving the preservation of the natural order established by some transcendental authority. We'll go through these. So the ethic of autonomy. And this is what is seen in Kohlberg's model of moral reasoning. It focuses on individual freedom and rights, especially choice and individual liberty. The West focuses on the ethic of autonomy, while much of the world focuses on the following two ethics, beyond that. So it's based on the idea that people are autonomous individuals with wants, needs, and preferences. People should be free to meet their wants, needs, and preferences. So societies develop moral concepts of rights, liberty, and justice, allowing people to coexist peacefully without interfering too much in each other's pursuits. Okay? Now, the other two added by Schroeder that go beyond Kohlberg is the idea of ethic of community. It's the idea that people are members of families, teams, armies, companies, tribes, and nations, more than just each person who comprises them. People have the obligation to play their roles in these larger entities. Societies develop moral concepts such as duty, hierarchy, respect, reputation, and patriotism. Western norms are that people should live their own lives and pursue their own goals, and that seems selfish and a dangerous way to weaken the social fabric that everyone depends upon. So part of this is the idea that there are these moral obligations. Cultural variations in what is considered a moral obligation include objective obligation, where people should do something even if no rule exists to tell people to do it. And if obligation exists only when the law is present, the obligation is perceived as a matter of convention, not an objective obligation. Then there's the legitimately regulated obligation, where people should be prevented from doing something and should be punished if they do it. If not a moral obligation, then it is a conventional or personal choice. So think about this in terms of obligation, this idea of object or a legitimate obligation. So in the book, we talked about Ben's scenario. Ben was in LA. He was going to his friend's wedding and bringing the rings. Someone stole his wallet and no one would lend him money. And he noticed a man's expensive jacket and wallet sticking out. Should he take or borrow the money? What are his ethics? Are they justice or autonomy versus interpersonal obligation to community. Should he do what he feels is right and not steal or steal? Or should he take his obligation so seriously to get to that wedding that it doesn't matter what could happen to him as long as he does everything he can to get to that wedding? Think about what you think. In my classes, I've had people who have told me that Hein should not steal the drug to make sure his wife is saved from her cancer, but still feel that Ben should steal the money to make sure he gets to the friend's wedding, because obligation to be at a place was more important than not doing something that our society would probably view as wrong. It's very interesting. So think about that. Researchers asked Americans and Indians about Ben's dilemma. Justice or autonomy violations versus interpersonal community violations. That's what they asked about. And they found that regardless of the severity of the violations, Indians consistently chose to uphold interpersonal obligations, breaking obligations to others, not breaking obligations to others, while Americans or Westerners were more focused on not breaking the law, which is justice obligation. For Indians, interpersonal obligation was not a personal choice, and for the Americans, individuals didn't like obligation or duty to others. They liked their freedom of choice. Americans or Westerners don't like words like obligation and duty and prefer to see our actions as helping as a personal choice. Still, even within one country, there can be much variation in moral reasoning. Within each country, while there's a general pattern towards certain ways of thinking, there are also many people who would arrive at different solutions to the same moral dilemma. So remember, even within, we still have variation. So let's end by talking about the morals of ethics. Ethics of divinity, sorry. So this is based on the idea that people are temporary vessels within a divine soul that has been implanted. They are the children of God and should behave accordingly. The body is a temple, not a playground. Even if an act does not harm and does not violate others' rights, there are still things one should not do because it degrades them, dishonors the Creator, and violates the sacred order of the universe. Moral concepts include sanctity and sin, purity and pollution, elevation and degradation. So, personal liberty of secular Western nations look like libertarianism, hedonism, and a celebration of humanity's baser instincts. People who abide by the ethic of divinity are more concerned about emotional reactions that they may get about whether there has been a violation of the natural order of things. So remember in our book about the man who had sex with a chicken. Was this a moral breach? For something to be immoral needs to be viewed as universally wrong and something that should be prevented. So I'll stop here and then we'll continue with our next topic.